The late afternoon sun hung low over the Nevada territory, painting the Badlands in shades of rust and gold. Jonas' heart squinted against the glare as he guided his horse down the narrow trail that wound between the red rock formations. The year was 1872, and this stretch of land between Utah and Nevada was about as unforgiving as country could get. Dry riverbeds snaked through the valley like scars, testament to water that hadn't flowed in months. Jonas had made his peace with the loneliness. 3 years now since he'd hung up his guns and taken to raising wild horses in this forgotten corner of the world. At 34, he figured he'd seen enough blood for one lifetime. The Mustangs didn't ask questions about a man's past, and that suited him fine. He was checking his trap lines near Willow Creek, what the locals generously called the muddy trickle that still held water, when he heard the first gunshot. The sound cracked across the canyon walls, followed by another, then voices, harsh and urgent, carried on the wind. Jonas pulled his mare to a stop behind a cluster of sagebrush. Old habits died hard. His hand found the colt at his hip before he even thought about it. Through the brush, he could see riders, 4 of them, chasing something. No, someone, a figure on foot, scrambling over the rocks toward the creek. "Ain't nowhere to run, missy," one of the riders hollered. "Your daddy's paying good money to bring you back proper." The runner stumbled, and Jonas saw her clearly for the first time. A young woman, maybe 22 or 23, her Eastern dress torn and dusty. Dark hair had come loose from what must have been a proper lady's arrangement, streaming behind her as she ran. Even from this distance, he could see the determination in how she moved, not the panic of prey, but the calculated desperation of someone who'd rather die than be caught. She splashed into the shallow creek, and one of the riders fired again. The bullet struck the water just feet from where she stood. That's enough of that. Jonas heard his own voice before he realized he'd decided to speak. He nudged his horse into view, keeping his hand visible on his gun. 4 against 1 don't seem sporting, boys. The riders wheeled to face him. The leader, a thick-set man with a week's worth of stubble, spat tobacco juice into the dust. "This ain't your concern. Stranger, we're conducting legal business. Girl's a runaway, and her father wants her home." Legal business usually don't require shooting at unarmed women, Jonas observed mildly. The woman had frozen in the creek, watching this exchange with eyes the color of storm clouds. She was breathing hard, one hand pressed to her side. Her dress, once probably blue, was now the color of trail dust. But she stood straight, chin up, like she was ready to keep running if she had to. "Like I said," the leader continued, his hand drifting toward his own weapon. "Ain't your concern. You'd be smart to ride on." Jonas had lived this long by being able to read a situation. These weren't lawmen or even proper bounty hunters. Hired thugs, most likely, the kind who'd enjoy their work a little too much. He'd ridden with their type, once upon a time, knew exactly what would happen to the girl if they caught her. "I reckon I'm not too smart then," Jonas said. He shifted slightly in his saddle, a movement that put his gun hand in perfect position. The other riders noticed. "How about this? You boys head on back and tell whoever's paying you that the young lady met with an unfortunate accident. Fell in the river, got swept away. Tragic loss." "You fixing to draw on all 4 of us?" The leader's voice had gone cold. "Won't have to draw on all 4. Jonas's voice was conversational, almost bored. "Just you. The others'll scatter quick enough once you're down. Question is, are you being paid enough to die today?" For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the wind through the canyon and the girl's ragged breathing. Jonas had learned long ago that most men who made their living with guns were calculating sorts. They weighed odds like merchants weighed gold. The leader's eyes flicked to his men, then back to Jonas. Something in Jonas's stillness, the complete lack of tension in his gun hand, must have decided him. "This ain't over," he growled. Girl's got a price on her head. Others'll come looking." "Let them come," Jonas said. The riders wheeled their horses and galloped back the way they'd come, dust rising in their wake. Jonas waited until they were specks in the distance before he looked at the woman. She hadn't moved from the creek, watching him with those storm-gray eyes. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, with the kind of fine features that spoke of breeding and education. A purple bruise was forming on her cheek. "You planning to shoot me too?" she asked. Her voice had a slight tremor, but her gaze was steady. "No, ma'am." Jonas holstered his gun. "Though I'm starting to wonder if I should have minded my own business. You bring trouble with you." "Those men would say so." She climbed out of the creek, water dripping from her ruined skirts. "My name is Sarah Whitmore. And yes, I suppose I am trouble. My father arranged a marriage to a man old enough to be my grandfather, a banker who owns half of Kansas City. When I refused, he decided I didn't have a choice in the matter." "So you ran." "So I ran." She swayed slightly, and Jonas saw the red seeping through her dress at her side. "You're hurt." She looked down, seeming surprised. "Oh, one of them must have. I didn't notice." Jonas swung down from his horse, pulling his canteen free. "Let me see." She stepped back. "I'm fine. You're bleeding, and those men will be back with reinforcements. I've got a place about an hour's ride from here. You can clean up, rest, figure out your next move." "Why would you help me?" Suspicion colored her voice. "You don't know me." Jonas shrugged. "Maybe I've got a weakness for lost causes. Or maybe I just don't like seeing 4 men chase down 1 woman. Either way, that wound needs tending, and you need to be gone before they come back." She studied him for a long moment. He knew what she saw, a man who'd spent too long in the sun, wearing clothes that had seen better days, with the kind of scars that came from a violent life. Not exactly a figure to inspire trust. "I don't even know your name," she said finally. "Jonas Hart. And what do you do out here, Mr. Hart, besides rescuing women from hired thugs?" "I raise horses, keep to myself, try not to shoot anyone if I can help it." Despite everything, a small smile touched her lips. "How's that working out for you?" "Up until about 10 minutes ago, pretty well." She pressed her hand tighter against her side, and fresh blood seeped between her fingers. The defiance in her eyes flickered. "All right, Mr. Hart, I don't seem to have many options. But if you try anything improper—" "Ma'am, all I'm offering is a place to rest and maybe some beans that ain't been burnt too bad. You want to leave come morning? I'll point you toward the nearest town and wish you luck." She nodded, and he helped her onto his horse. Noting how she bit her lip against the pain, as he swung up behind her, she stiffened at the necessity of his arm around her waist. "Which way?" she asked. "North, toward the mountains. It ain't much, but it's shelter." As they rode, Jonas found himself uncomfortably aware of her presence, the way she smelled of lavender water beneath the trail dust, the determined set of her shoulders despite her injury. He'd been alone too long if he was noticing such things about a woman who was nothing but trouble. The sun was setting by the time they reached his place, a cabin and barn tucked into a box canyon. Invisible from the main trails, a small corral held a dozen Mustangs, their coats gleaming in the dying light. "It's not much," he said, helping her down. Sarah looked around, taking in the neat garden, the well-maintained buildings, the peace of the place. "It's perfect," she said softly, "like the rest of the world doesn't exist." That's the general idea. Inside the cabin, he lit a lamp and pointed to a curtained corner. "There's a bed back there. I'll heat some water so you can clean that wound. Got some whiskey for the pain, if you're inclined." "I don't drink spirits," she said automatically, then winced. "Though perhaps today I'll make an exception." Jonas busied himself with the fire, trying not to think about how his orderly life had just been upended. The woman, Sarah, sat at his rough table, looking incongruous in her torn finery.
"Those horses outside," she said, "they're beautiful."
"Mustangs. Caught them wild. Been gentling them for sale." "Gentling, not breaking." He glanced at her, surprised by the distinction. "Horse that's broken is just that, broken. No spirit left, but you gentle them right. They keep their fire. Just choose to work with you instead of against you." "That's not how most people see it." "Most people are fools." She laughed, then gasped as the movement pulled at her wound. Jonas set the water to heat and fetched his medical supplies, such as they were. "I'll need to see that wound," he said. Color rose in her cheeks. "I can manage." "You can't even see it proper. Look, I've patched up plenty of men in my time. You ain't nothing I haven't seen before." "How reassuring," she said dryly. But she stood and unbuttoned enough of her dress to expose the gash along her ribs. It was shallow, but long, already angry-looking. Jonas cleaned it with practiced efficiency, noting how she never made a sound despite what must have been considerable pain. When he was done, she rebuttoned her dress with shaking fingers. "Thank you," she said. "You'll need to keep it clean. Infection's the real danger out here." "I know about danger, Mr. Hart." She met his eyes. "Those men, they'll come back, won't they?" "Likely so. Your father must want you back something fierce." "My father wants the marriage alliance. I'm just currency." The bitterness in her voice could have curdled milk. $40,000 in a partnership in the bank? That's what I'm worth. Some might say that's a lot to give up. Would you say that? Jonas thought about it. I gave up a lot more for a lot less. Just wanted peace. And did you find it? Had it for 3 years, until today. She had the grace to look guilty. "I'm sorry. I'll leave in the morning. I never meant—" "You'll leave when that wound's healed, and not before. After that," he shrugged. "We'll see what we see." Outside, one of the horses nickered. Jonas went to the window, watching the darkness. Somewhere out there, those riders were making camp, planning their next move. He'd bought time. Nothing more. "What did you give up?" Sarah asked quietly. "If you don't mind my asking." Jonas was quiet for so long she probably thought he wouldn't answer. "Finally," he said. "A life that wasn't worth living. Friends who weren't friends. A woman who—" He stopped. "Like I said, I wanted peace. And now I've brought war to your doorstep. Maybe, or maybe I've just been hiding long enough." She studied him in the lamplight. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. When you faced down those men, I thought you must be another hired gun. But you're not. Are you not anymore? We are what we choose to be, Miss Whitmore, every morning. We get that choice." "Sarah," she said, "if I'm going to bleed all over your cabin, you might as well call me Sarah." Despite himself, Jonas felt his lips twitch toward a smile. "Fair enough. There's beans on the stove if you're hungry. I'll see to the horses." He left her there, sitting at his table like she belonged. As he walked to the barn, Jonas wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. 3 years of peace, shattered by a woman with storm-gray eyes and too much courage for her own good. The Mustangs greeted him with soft whickers, and he spent a while checking them over, finding comfort in the routine. When he finally returned to the cabin, he found Sarah asleep in the chair, her head pillowed on her arms. In sleep, she looked younger, vulnerable in a way her waking self would never allow. Jonas covered her with a blanket and settled into his bedroll by the fire. Tomorrow would bring what it brought. For tonight, at least, she was safe. But as he lay there listening to her breathing, he knew his days of peace were over. Somewhere in the darkness, trouble was coming. And for reasons he didn't want to examine too closely, he found he didn't mind as much as he should have. The Virgin might have found shelter at the river, but the real storm was just beginning. The morning sun crept through the cabin's single window, painting golden squares across the rough wooden floor. Jonas woke to find Sarah already up, standing at the stove with her back to him. She'd found his coffee pot and was attempting to coax life from the cold ashes of last night's fire. "The kindling's in the box by the door," he said, sitting up. She startled slightly, but didn't turn.
"I know. I found it.
She gestured helplessly at the stove. "I've never actually built a fire before." "Never." "We had servants for that." The admission seemed to embarrass her. "I suppose that makes me rather useless out here." Jonas rose and crossed to the stove. "Move aside." He showed her how to arrange the kindling, where to place the larger pieces, how to coax the flame to life. She watched intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. Like this. She arranged a few sticks as he'd shown her.
"That'll do. Now light the match. Careful. They're precious out here, and hold it to the dried grass at the bottom."
The fire caught, and her face lit up with genuine pleasure. "I did it." "You did." He stepped back, oddly charmed by her enthusiasm. "Coffee'll take a while. How's the wound?" "Sore, but better. The bleeding stopped." She touched her side gingerly. "Thank you for yesterday. For all of this." "Don't thank me yet. We still got to figure what to do about those men." As if in response to his words, the sound of hoofbeats carried through the morning air. Jonas moved to the window, peering out carefully. A lone rider was approaching, moving slow and easy. "Stay inside," he told Sarah, checking his gun as he stepped onto the porch. The rider was a woman, which surprised him, Mexican by the look of her, wearing men's clothing and sitting her horse like she'd been born to it. She stopped well short of the cabin, hands visible on the saddle horn. "Jonas Hart," she called. "Who's asking?" "Maria Delgado. I ride for the Box J Ranch. Mr. Johnson sent me to find you." Jonas relaxed fractionally. Tom Johnson was one of the few men in the territory he'd call a friend. "What's Tom want?" "There's men in town asking about a woman, offering good money for information. Mr. Johnson thought you should know, seeing as how you helped a certain lady yesterday by Willow Creek." Jonas suppressed a curse. News traveled fast in the territory. "These men say what they want with her. They say she's a runaway, say her father's worried sick." Maria's expression suggested she didn't believe a word of it. "But the way they're acting, asking their questions. Mr. Johnson, he remembers you from before, says you'd want to know. Tell Tom I appreciate the warning." Maria nodded, but didn't turn to go. "There's something else. The man leading them. Wilson's his name. He's been known to find what he's looking for, one way or another. He's got 8 men with him now. They're planning to start searching the homesteads." "When?" "Tomorrow, most like. They spent today drinking and asking questions." Jonas did the math. 8 men, plus Wilson made 9. Not odds he liked, even in his younger days. "There's a stage comes through Coyote Springs on Friday," Maria continued. 4 days from now. If someone was looking to leave the territory, that might be their chance. I'll keep that in mind." Maria touched her hat. "You never were one for taking advice. Hart, but Mr. Johnson says to tell you, some fights ain't worth having. Not anymore." After she left, Jonas found Sarah standing just inside the door, her face pale. "9 men," she said quietly. "You heard." "I'll leave, now. I won't have your death on my conscience. And go where you won't make it 10 miles on foot with that wound. Even if I gave you a horse, you don't know the country." "Then what do you suggest?" Frustration colored her voice. "I won't just sit here and wait for them to come." Jonas considered their options. "Can you ride?" "Of course, I just haven't had much opportunity lately." "Then we'll start there. You're going to need to know how to handle yourself on a horse if we're going to get you to that stage." Over the next hours, Jonas introduced her to the Mustangs. He watched her approach them, saw her natural caution tempered with curiosity. The horses, usually skittish around strangers, seemed to accept her readily enough. "This one likes you," he said as a small bay mare nuzzled Sarah's outstretched hand.
"She's beautiful. What's her name?"
"Don't name them. Makes it harder when it comes time to sell." Sarah gave him a look that suggested she saw right through that lie.
"But you do name them, don't you?"
"When no one's listening," despite himself. Jonas smiled.
"That one's Buttercup, on account of how she likes to eat the yellow flowers up in the high meadow."
"Buttercup." Sarah stroked the mare's neck. Would she let me ride her? One way to find out. He saddled the mare, noting how Sarah watched every movement. When he helped her mount, she settled into the saddle like she'd been born to it, though she winced at the pull on her wound. "Easy now," he cautioned. "Just walk her around the corral first." But Sarah proved to be a natural rider, or perhaps just well-trained. Within an hour, she was trotting Buttercup around the enclosure with confidence. "You're full of surprises," Jonas observed. "My mother insisted I learn to ride properly. She said a lady should be accomplished in all things." Sarah's smile turned rueful, though I doubt she imagined I'd use the skill for running away. That afternoon, Jonas taught her other things: how to load and shoot his spare revolver, how to read the landscape for water and shelter, how to start a fire without wasting matches. She absorbed it all with the same focused intensity, asking questions that showed she understood the stakes. "You're not what I expected from a banker's daughter," he said as she successfully put 6 shots in a makeshift target. "And you're not what I expected from a former gunfighter." She lowered the weapon. "Will you tell me about it, your past?" Jonas was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun sink toward the mountains. "Not much to tell. I was good with a gun, and men paid for that skill. Did things I'm not proud of. Lost things that mattered. End of story."
"That's not the end. You're here now. You chose to change."
"Sometimes change chooses you." That evening, as they shared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Sarah told him more about her life in Kansas City, the strict rules, the suffocating expectations. The moment she'd realized she'd rather risk death than submit to a loveless marriage to a man who saw her as property.
"My father couldn't understand,"
she said.
"He kept saying what an honor it was, how lucky I was. When I refused, he locked me in my room, said I'd stay there until I came to my senses."
"So you escaped." "Climbed out the window and down the rose trellis in my nightgown. Stole clothes from the washing line and money from Father's study. Caught the first train west." She laughed bitterly.
"I made it almost to Denver before they caught up with me the first time."
"The first time? I've been running for 3 weeks. They've almost caught me twice before yesterday." Jonas studied her with new respect. "You're tougher than you look." "I've had to be." That night, Jonas gave her his bed and took the floor again. But sleep eluded him. He found himself listening to her breathing, the occasional restless movement. When she cried out softly in her sleep, he almost went to her, but stopped himself. That way lay complications he couldn't afford. The next morning brought new challenges. Sarah's wound, while healing, had stiffened overnight. She moved carefully, trying to hide her discomfort. "We need to check that," Jonas said. "It's fine." "It's not fine if it's infected. Don't be foolish." She submitted to his examination with poor grace, but the wound looked clean. As he rebandaged it, he was acutely aware of her nearness, the trust she was showing him. "There," he said, stepping back quickly. "Should heal clean if you don't aggravate it." They spent the day preparing. Jonas showed her the trails leading away from the cabin, the places to hide if riders came. He packed saddlebags with supplies, ready to run if needed. "I've been thinking," Sarah said as they worked. "What if I just faced them, went back? Maybe if I agreed to the marriage." "No." The word came out harsher than Jonas intended. "You don't negotiate with men like Wilson. You go back now, after all this trouble. and they'll make sure you never run again." "Then what do you suggest?"
"We get you on that stage. You disappear. Start over somewhere they won't think to look. And you—"
"I'll handle Wilson."
She turned to face him fully. "You mean you'll kill them?"
"If it comes to that." "No."
Now it was her turn to be firm. "I won't have that on my conscience. There has to be another way."
"Sometimes there isn't."
"There's always another way. You proved that when you walked away from your old life."
Jonas wanted to argue, to explain that the world didn't work that way, that some men only understood violence. But looking at her earnest face, he found he couldn't crush that idealism, not yet, not. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun paint the canyon walls red, Sarah asked, "Do you ever get lonely out here?"
"Didn't used to think so."
"And now," he glanced at her, "now I remember why I chose lonely in the first place. Easier than this. Caring what happens to someone." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly,
"I care what happens to you, too."
The words hung between them, dangerous as loaded guns. Jonas stood abruptly. "I'll check the horses." But as he walked to the corral, he could feel her watching him, could feel the pull of something he'd thought dead and buried. 3 years of peace, shattered by a woman who didn't know when to quit. That night, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and filling the air with dust. Jonas lay awake, planning. 4 days to the stage, 3 days to keep Sarah safe and get her to Coyote Springs, 3 days to avoid Wilson and his men. He could do it, had to do it, because the alternative, letting them take her back to a life she'd rather die than live, was unthinkable. When had she become more than just a problem to solve? When had her safety become more important than his peace? Jonas didn't have answers. All he knew was that come morning, they'd have to move. The slow days were ending. The storm was coming. And despite everything, despite the danger and the certainty of violence ahead, Jonas found himself looking forward to it, because for the first time in 3 years, he had something worth fighting for. Even if he could never tell her that. The night was deep and moonless when Jonas woke to the sound of Buttercup's nervous whinny. He was on his feet instantly, gun in hand, peering through the window into the darkness. The other horses were restless too, milling in the corral.
"What is it?"
Sarah whispered from the bed.
"Maybe nothing, maybe coyotes."
But his instincts, honed by years of survival, said otherwise.
"Get dressed, quietly."
While she fumbled in the dark, Jonas slipped out the back door. The night air was cool against his skin, carrying the scent of sage and something else, tobacco smoke. Faint but unmistakable. They'd found him sooner than expected. He circled the cabin silently, every sense alert. There, movement in the rocks above the corral. At least 2 men, maybe more. They were being cautious, which meant they weren't sure if he was aware of them yet. Jonas slipped back inside. Sarah was dressed, her face pale in the dimness. "They're here," he said quietly. "At least 2, watching the place. They'll wait for dawn to make their move." "What do we do?"
"We leave now, before they realize we know they're there."
They gathered what they could carry. Food, water, ammunition. Jonas saddled Buttercup and his own mount, a steady gelding named Dust, moving with practiced silence. Sarah held the horses while he secured their gear. "The back trail," he whispered. "It's narrow and rocky, but it'll put the canyon walls between us and them." They led the horses on foot for the first quarter mile, Jonas listening for any sign they'd been spotted. But the night remained quiet except for the normal sounds of the desert, the distant call of an owl, the rustle of small creatures in the brush. Once they were far enough from the cabin, they mounted up. Jonas led the way, trusting Dust to find his footing in the darkness. Behind him, Sarah rode in silence, adapting to Buttercup's gait with surprising ease. They rode through the night, putting miles between themselves and the cabin. As dawn broke, Jonas led them up into higher country, where jumbled rocks and twisted pines offered cover. They stopped in a hollow where a spring fed a small pool, the horses grateful for the water. "We can rest here a bit," Jonas said, helping Sarah down. She moved stiffly, one hand pressed to her side. "I'm fine," she said, but her face was drawn with pain. "Let me see." The wound had reopened slightly, blood seeping through the bandage. Jonas cleaned it as best he could with what they had, trying to ignore how she bit her lip against the pain. "This is my fault," she said as he worked. "Your home, everything you built." "It's just a place. I've left plenty of places behind. But this one was different. This one was yours." He tied off the fresh bandage, avoiding her eyes. Maybe it was time to move on anyway. They rested through the heat of the day, taking turns keeping watch. Jonas taught her how to read the landscape for signs of pursuit, how to distinguish between the dust raised by wind and that raised by horses. "You're a quick study," he observed as she correctly identified a hawk's shadow passing over the rocks. "I had a good teacher," she paused, then added, "Will you tell me about her, the woman you mentioned, the one you lost?" Jonas was quiet for so long she probably thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "Her name was Elena, Mexican girl from down near the border. Her family had a little ranch, ran some cattle. I was working for a man who wanted their water rights." "What happened?" "What always happened in those days. When her father wouldn't sell, things got ugly. I tried to stay out of it, but..." He picked up a stick, broke it between his fingers. "She got caught in the crossfire, died trying to protect her little brother. I'm sorry." "I quit that day, took my guns and rode out. Haven't worked for another man since." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "And you blame yourself?" "Who else is there to blame? I chose that life. Chose to work for men who solved problems with bullets. You didn't pull the trigger. Didn't stop it either." He stood abruptly. "We should move. They'll be tracking us by now." They rode through the afternoon, following game trails and creek beds, always moving higher into the mountains. Jonas showed her how to hide their tracks, how to use the rocky ground to their advantage. As evening approached, they came to a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of badlands. In the distance, the lights of Coyote Springs twinkled like fallen stars. "There," Jonas said. 2 days' ride if we're careful." "It looks so far." "Everything looks far from up here, but we'll make it." They made camp in a grove of pines, building a small fire in a pit Jonas dug to hide the flames. As they ate cold biscuits and jerky, Sarah said, "Tell me about the horses. How did you start catching them?" Grateful for the change of subject, Jonas told her about tracking the wild herds, learning their patterns, how patience worked better than force, how trust had to be earned slowly. "The first one took me 3 months," he said. "A big black stallion, kept getting close, then spooking. Finally figured out I was moving too fast, wanting it too much. Soon as I stopped chasing and just started being where he was, things changed." "What happened to him?" "Sold him to a good family up north. Last I heard, their boy was winning races on him." "Do you miss him?" "Sometimes, but that's the way of it. You gentle them, train them, then let them go to live their lives." Sarah poked at the fire with a stick. "Sounds lonely." "It is," he glanced at her. "Or was until recently." Their eyes met across the fire, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of what was growing there. Dangerous as wildfire in drought season. "Jonas," she began, but he held up a hand. "Someone's coming." They doused the fire quickly, Sarah helping to scatter the ashes while Jonas gathered their gear. The sound of horses grew louder, at least 3 riders, moving fast up the trail they'd used. "This way," Jonas whispered, leading her and the horses deeper into the trees. They crouched in the darkness. The horses held tight to prevent them calling out. Jonas could feel Sarah trembling beside him, though whether from fear or cold he couldn't tell. The riders passed within 50 feet of their position. Jonas recognized Wilson's voice, cursing the darkness and the rocky trail.
They came this way, I'm sure of it. One man said.
Then we keep going, Wilson replied.
That girl's worth too much to give up now.
They waited long minutes after the riders passed before Jonas deemed it safe to move. But instead of continuing on the trail, he led them back down the mountain at an angle, using a route he discovered years ago.
Won't they realize we doubled back?
Sarah whispered. Not until morning. By then we'll be long gone. They rode through the night again, exhaustion weighing on them both. Sarah swayed in the saddle, and Jonas finally called a halt in a box canyon where they'd be hidden from view. Sleep, he told her. I'll keep watch.
You need rest too.
I'll manage. Done it before. She spread her blanket on the ground, but before lying down, she touched his arm.
Thank you for all of this. I know what it's cost you.
You don't know the half of it, he thought, but said only,
get some sleep.
He sat with his back against a rock, rifle across his knees, watching the night. Sarah's breathing evened out quickly, exhaustion claiming her. In sleep, her face lost its careful composure, revealing the vulnerability beneath. Jonas had known he was in trouble the moment she'd stood in that creek, chin up despite being outnumbered and outgunned. But these past days had made it worse. Her quick mind, her determination, the way she'd taken to the hard life without complaint, it all reminded him of things he'd thought he'd never want again. Near dawn, she stirred, whimpering softly in her sleep. Without thinking, Jonas moved to her side, touching her shoulder gently.
Easy, he murmured. Just a dream.
Her eyes opened, unfocused with sleep and fear.
They found us.
No one's found us. You're safe. She blinked, awareness returning. Her hand found his where it rested on her shoulder. You're really here.
Where else would I be? I dreamed you left, that you decided I wasn't worth the trouble.
Sarah. He should pull away, should put distance between them. Instead, he found himself brushing a strand of hair from her face. I'm not going anywhere. Promise. I promise. She held his gaze for a long moment, then lifted her hand to cover his against her cheek.
Jonas,
Don't. His voice was rough. Don't say something we'll both regret. Would we regret it? He pulled away, the loss of contact almost painful. You're running from one cage. Don't fly into another. Is that what you think you are, a cage? I'm a man with blood on his hands and nothing to offer but a hard life in hard country. You deserve better. What if I don't want better? What if I want? You don't know what you want. You're scared, grateful, maybe mixing that up with something else. She sat up fully, eyes flashing.
Don't tell me what I feel. I've had men telling me what I should feel my whole life.
I'm trying to protect you. From Wilson or from yourself. Jonas didn't have an answer for that. He stood, checking the lightening sky. We need to move. Another day's ride to Coyote Springs. Sarah rose without argument, but he could feel her watching him as they broke camp, could feel the weight of words unspoken between them. As they mounted up, she said quietly, You're wrong. You know, about what I deserve, what I want. Maybe, but you'll have plenty of time to figure that out once you're safe on that stage. And if I already know? Jonas didn't answer, just urged us forward, behind him. He heard Sarah sigh, but she followed without further argument. The new day brought new dangers. They'd have to cross open country to reach Coyote Springs, exposed and vulnerable. And somewhere behind them, Wilson and his men were realizing they'd been tricked. But for now, they rode in silence through the morning light, two people running from different things, toward a future neither could quite see. The Virgin might have stood naked at the river in Jonas's past, but it was Sarah who threatened to strip away all his carefully constructed defenses. And that terrified him more than any number of hired guns ever could. The morning mist clung to the river valley like a silk veil, the sun just beginning to burn through. Jonas had led them down from the high country during the night, and now they followed the winding course of Cedar Creek toward Coyote Springs. The water ran clear and cold, fed by mountain snow, and the cottonwoods along its banks provided welcome shade. "We'll rest the horses," Jonas said, dismounting near a sandy bend where the creek widened into a natural pool. "Let them drink and graze a bit." Sarah slid from Buttercup's back with obvious relief. 3 days of hard riding had taken their toll, though she'd never complained. Her borrowed men's clothing, Jonas had insisted she change from her torn dress, was dusty and sweat-stained. But somehow she still managed to look like she belonged in a drawing room rather than the wilderness. "How far to town?" she asked, leading Buttercup to the water. "Maybe 10 miles. We'll wait for dusk. Ride in after dark. Less chance of being noticed." Sarah nodded, then looked longingly at the pool. Would there be time to wash just quickly? I feel like I'm wearing half the territory." Jonas scanned their surroundings. The valley was peaceful. No sign of pursuit. Still, his instincts prickled with unease. "Make it fast. I'll keep watch upstream." He positioned himself on a small rise about 50 yards away, where he could see anyone approaching while giving her privacy. The sound of splashing water carried to him, and he resolutely kept his eyes on the horizon. "Jonas," her voice, uncertain. "What's wrong?" "The bandage is stuck. I need help." He closed his eyes briefly, then made his way back to the pool. Sarah stood in the shallows, wearing her chemise, the wet fabric clinging to her form. She'd managed to remove the outer wrapping, but the part directly over the wound had dried to the skin. "Turn around," he said gruffly. She did, lifting her arm to give him access. Jonas knelt at the water's edge, gently working the bandage free. The wound looked better. No sign of infection, already starting to heal clean. "It's mending well," he said, his voice rougher than intended. This close. He could see the delicate line of her neck, the way the morning light caught in the water droplets on her skin. "Jonas." She turned to face him, and suddenly the space between them seemed to disappear. "Sarah." It came out as a warning, or maybe a plea. "I know what you're going to say, that I'm young, that I don't know my own mind, that this is just circumstances." She stepped closer, water swirling around her ankles. "But you're wrong." "Am I?" "When I was 16, my father threw a party for a business associate. I was meant to play piano, be decorative, prove what a suitable wife I'd make for someone important. I played Mozart perfectly, smiled at all the right times, said all the right things. And that night, I stood at my window and wondered if this was all there would ever be." She was close enough now that he could see the gold flecks in her gray eyes, count the freckles the sun had brought out across her nose. "Then these past days with you, I've been terrified, exhausted, hurt, but I've also been more alive than in all my years in Kansas City. When you look at me, you don't see a banker's daughter or a runaway bride. You see me." "Sarah." She pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. "I know we've only known each other a few days. I know you think you're protecting me. But Jonas, when I stood in this water that first day by Willow Creek, when I saw you face down those men for a stranger, I knew." "Knew what?" "That you were the kind of man who'd choose what's right over what's easy, the kind who'd give up his home to keep someone safe." Her hand moved to rest against his chest, over his heart. The kind who looks at wild horses and sees freedom worth preserving, not property to be broken. Jonas caught her hand, meaning to push it away. Instead, he found himself holding it there, feeling his heartbeat against her palm. "You don't know what you're asking." "Don't I?" She moved closer still, the morning light turning the water drops on her skin to diamonds.
I'm asking for a chance, for the choice my father never gave me.
For a long moment, they stood frozen there, the creek singing around them, the morning air cool against their skin. Jonas saw it all clearly. The impossibility of it, the disaster it invited, the 100 reasons he should step back. Instead, he lifted his free hand to her face, thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone.
"You beautiful, stubborn fool,"
he murmured.
"Is that a yes?"
He leaned down, and their lips met, tentative at first, then with growing heat. She tasted like creek water and possibility, like every dream he'd thought long dead. Her arms came up around his neck, and for a moment, there was nothing but this. The two of them in the morning light, the rest of the world forgotten. It was Jonas who pulled back first, breathing hard.
"We can't. Not here. Not now."
"When, then?" Her eyes searched his.
"After I get on that stage, after you send me away for my own good. Sarah?"
The crack of a rifle shot shattered the morning peace. Jonas moved instinctively, pulling Sarah down into the water as a bullet whined overhead.
"The horses,"
Sarah gasped. Jonas was already moving, half dragging her toward the cottonwoods where Dust and Buttercup were tied. More shots rang out, kicking up sand and water around them. They reached the minimal cover of the trees as riders burst from the upstream brush, Wilson and 3 men, firing as they came. "Stay down." Jonas shoved Sarah behind a fallen log, then grabbed his rifle from Dust's saddle. He fired twice, saw one rider tumble from his horse. The others scattered, seeking cover of their own. Jonas counted muzzle flashes. 3 rifles, maybe 30 yards out. Not good odds, but he'd faced worse. "Can you shoot?" he asked Sarah. She nodded, face pale but determined. He passed her his revolver. "Only if they get close. Make every shot count." For several minutes, they exchanged fire, Jonas using his ammunition carefully. He'd winged another man, evening the odds, but Wilson was smart, keeping to cover and trying to flank them. "Hart," Wilson's voice carried over the gunfire. "Give us the girl and you can ride out. No need for you to die over some rich man's runaway daughter." "Go to hell," Jonas called back, sighting down his rifle. "Have it your way." More gunfire erupted. Jonas heard Sarah gasp and turned to see her clutching her arm, blood seeping between her fingers. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "Just grazed me." But Jonas saw red. The cold, calculating part of him that he'd tried so hard to bury came roaring back. These men had hurt her. That was unacceptable. He checked his ammunition, 4 shots left in the rifle, plus what Sarah had in the revolver. The sun was climbing higher, eliminating shadows. Soon, Wilson would realize he could ford the creek downstream and come at them from behind. "Sarah," he said quietly, "when I tell you, take Buttercup and ride, hard as you can for town. I'm not leaving you." "You are. I'm going to buy you time." "Jonas, no." He gripped her shoulders, looked into her eyes. "You asked what you mean to me. This is your answer. I won't let them take you, not while I'm breathing." "Then keep breathing," she said fiercely, "because I won't have your death on my conscience." Despite everything, he almost smiled. "Stubborn woman. You wouldn't have me any other way." More shots rang out, closer now. Jonas could see Wilson working his way along the creek bank. Time was running out. Then, impossibly, he heard hoofbeats from the other direction. A lot of them. Jonas risked a look and felt hope surge. Tom Johnson and 6 Box J riders were thundering down the valley, guns drawn. Wilson's men saw them too. One broke cover, running for his horse, and Jonas dropped him with a clean shot. The last man threw down his gun. Hands up. But Wilson himself wheeled his horse and spurred toward Sarah's position. Jonas moved without thinking, stepping directly into the man's path. Wilson's gun swung toward him, and time seemed to slow. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Jonas felt the bullet tear along his ribs like a branding iron. But his own shot was true. Wilson toppled backward from his horse, hitting the ground hard and staying down. Jonas dropped to one knee, hand pressed to his side. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Sarah calling his name, felt her hands on his face. "I'm all right," he managed. "Just need a minute." Tom Johnson's men were securing the surviving outlaws when Tom himself dismounted beside them. "Maria said you might need help," Tom said, eyeing Jonas's wound. "Looks like she was right." "How did you know where?" "Figured you'd follow the creek. It's what I'd have done." Tom's weathered face crinkled in what might have been a smile. "You always did have a talent for finding trouble. Heart." "This time trouble found me," Jonas said, looking at Sarah. She was cradling his head in her lap, her own wound forgotten, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. "Don't you dare die on me, Jonas Hart, not when we just... not now." "Takes more than one bullet to kill me, darlin'." The endearment slipped out without thought. "Though I might need some of that nursing you've been practicing." Tom cleared his throat. "We'll get you both to town. Get the doc to look at those wounds. Miss, there's still a stage tomorrow if you're minded to take it." Sarah looked down at Jonas, then back at Tom. "I haven't decided yet. It seems I might have reasons to stay." Jonas reached up, touched her face. "You sure about that? This territory's hard on women. Harder still on women who choose men like me." "I've made harder choices," she said softly. "And I've never regretted following my heart." As Tom's men helped Jonas to his feet, supporting him between them, Jonas caught sight of the pool where everything had changed. The morning mist had burned away, leaving the water crystal clear, reflecting the vast sky above. The Virgin had stood in the water, and his hands hadn't been able to resist the call. But it wasn't her skin that had captured him. It was her spirit, wild and free as the mustangs he loved. "For the record," he said as they helped him onto his horse, "you're probably making a terrible mistake." Sarah swung up onto Buttercup with natural grace, despite her wounded arm. "Probably," she agreed. "But it's my mistake to make." And as they rode toward town, surrounded by Tom's protective riders, Jonas realized that sometimes the best things in life came from the worst decisions. He'd lost his peaceful solitude, his carefully maintained distance from the world. But he'd gained something worth far more, a woman who'd stood naked in more ways than one and chosen him anyway. The rest they'd figure out as they went. The doctor's office in Coyote Springs smelled of carbolic and whiskey. Jonas sat on the examination table, teeth gritted as Doc Hillman cleaned the bullet graze along his ribs. Through the thin walls, he could hear the Saturday evening crowd gathering at the saloon next door. "You're lucky," Doc Hillman said, wrapping clean bandages around Jonas's torso. "Inch to the left and we'd be having a different conversation." "Story of my life, Doc." The young lady was lucky too. Clean graze on her arm. She'll have a scar, but nothing worse. The doctor paused in his work. "Tom Johnson says there's quite a story behind all this." "Tom talks too much." Doc Hillman chuckled. "That he does. But the whole town's buzzing about Wilson and his boys, and about the woman they were chasing." Jonas pulled his shirt on carefully. "She's not their business." "Maybe not, but you know how small towns are. News travels. There's already been a telegram from Kansas City." Jonas went still. "What kind of telegram?" "Her father, I expect, offering a substantial reward for her safe return." The doctor met Jonas's eyes. $5,000 is a lot of money. "She's not for sale." "Didn't say she was, just thought you should know what's coming." Doc Hillman washed his hands in the basin. "That girl's got spine, I'll give her that. Stood right there and told Mrs. Patterson, the minister's wife, that she'd rather die than go back. Made quite an impression." Jonas paid the doctor and stepped out into the evening air. The sun was setting behind the buildings, painting Main Street in shades of amber. He found Sarah sitting on the hotel porch with Tom Johnson's wife, Maria, the same woman who'd brought the warning to his cabin. Sarah had changed into a simple calico dress that Maria had lent her, her injured arm in a sling. She looked young and vulnerable, but when she saw Jonas, her face lit up with a smile that made his chest tight for reasons that had nothing to do with his wound. "You shouldn't be up and about," she said, rising. "Takes more than a scratch to keep me down." He nodded to Maria. "Ma'am, thank you for looking after her." Maria studied him with knowing eyes. "Tom says you'll be staying in town a few days. We have a room at the ranch if you need it." "Appreciate the offer, but I've got a room at Murphy's boarding house." "And Miss Whitmore?" "I'm staying at the hotel." Sarah said, "Mrs. Murphy was quite clear that she doesn't rent rooms to unmarried ladies." Maria's lips twitched. "Yes, Agnes Murphy has strong opinions about propriety. Well, if you need anything, either of you, just send word." After she left, Jonas and Sarah stood awkwardly on the porch. The easy intimacy of their morning by the creek seemed like a dream now. Here in the harsh reality of civilization. "Have you eaten?" Jonas asked. "Mrs. Patterson brought me some stew. It was—" Sarah searched for words. "Interesting. I think she came mostly to lecture me about the wages of sin." "What did you tell her?" "That I'd rather earn wages than be sold like cattle." Sarah's smile was rueful. I don't think she appreciated my perspective. Despite everything, Jonas chuckled. "You're going to give this town plenty to talk about." "They're already talking about us." She met his eyes. "The stage leaves tomorrow afternoon. People want to know if I'm taking it." "Are you?" "That depends." "On what?" "On you." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "This morning, before Wilson came. Did you mean it, or was it just the moment?" Jonas glanced around. Several townspeople were watching them with poorly disguised interest. "Not here. Too many eyes." "Then where?" He considered. "There's a place I know, about a mile outside town. Can you write?" Doctor said to rest the arm, not that I was an invalid. An hour later, they sat on a bluff overlooking the valley. The lights of Coyote Springs spread below them like scattered stars. Jonas had brought a blanket and a canteen, and they sat side by side, not quite touching. "I used to come here when I first quit the life," Jonas said, "trying to figure out what came next." "And did you figure it out?" "Thought I had land, horses, solitude. Seemed like enough." Until a stubborn woman decided to stand her ground in a creek." Sarah laughed softly. "I wasn't standing my ground. I was terrified." "Could have fooled me." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Sarah asked, "What did the doctor tell you about the telegrams?" Jonas wasn't surprised she knew. "Your father's offering $5,000 for your return. That's more than he offered Wilson. I should be flattered." Her voice was bitter. "Will anyone take it?" "Not in this town. Tom Johnson's word carries weight, and he's made it clear you're under his protection." "And yours?" Jonas turned to face her. In the moonlight, she looked ethereal, like something from a dream. "Sarah, this morning I said things, felt things, but you need to understand what you'd be choosing. I'm not a man who'll give you an easy life. I've got blood on my hands and ghosts in my past. You could get on that stage tomorrow, start fresh somewhere." "Stop." She placed her hand over his. "Just stop. Do you think I care about Easy? I had Easy. Easy was a prison with silk curtains. Easy was dying slowly inside while everyone told me how fortunate I was. This is different. This is hard winters and harder work. This is people whispering behind your back, maybe never quite accepting you. This is choosing my own life." Sarah interrupted. "This is waking up beside a man who sees me as a person, not property. This is freedom. Jonas, real freedom. You barely know me."
Then tell me the worst of it. Tell me what you think will send me running.
Jonas looked out over the valley, gathering his thoughts.
I killed my first man when I was 19. He was cheating at cards. Pulled a knife. It was self-defense, but I'll never forget the look in his eyes when he fell.
He paused. After that, killing got easier. Too easy. I hired out to whoever paid best. Did things that needed doing but nobody wanted to talk about in daylight.
How many?
Her voice was soft, without judgment.
23. I kept count at first, thinking it mattered. Then I stopped counting, and that's when I knew I'd lost something I couldn't get back.
He turned to her. That's who you're sitting with.
Sarah, a killer who got tired of killing.
She was quiet for a long moment.
Then, do you know what my father told me the night he announced my engagement?
He said I should be grateful, mister. Hartley was willing to overlook my willfulness, that at 22, I was practically a spinster, that my only value was in the connections I could bring through marriage. She stood, pacing to the edge of the bluff.
I sat through dinner while they discussed me like I was livestock.
My dowry, my breeding potential, my docility, or lack thereof. Mister. Hartley actually examined my teeth, like I was a horse he was buying.
Sarah,
you've killed 23 men. I've been dying for 22 years. Which of us has more blood on their hands?
Jonas rose and went to her, standing close but not touching. It's not the same. Isn't it?
She turned to face him.
You chose to stop, to change, to build something different. That's all I'm trying to do.
And if I disappoint you, if the reality isn't what you imagined, then I'll deal with that when it happens. But Jonas... She reached up, touched his face. I'd rather take that chance than spend the rest of my life wondering what if... He caught her hand, held it against his cheek.
You're impossibly stubborn.
You've mentioned that before. Just so we're clear on it. Crystal clear. They stood there on the bluff, the night wind cool around them. The world spread out below. Jonas thought about all the reasons this was a bad idea, all the ways it could go wrong. Then he thought about the alternative, putting her on that stage tomorrow, watching her disappear from his life, going back to his empty cabin, his solitary existence, his carefully maintained walls. There's something else, he said. The horses. I was planning to sell them, move on. After Elena, I never stayed anywhere too long. And now I'm thinking about building something more permanent. A real ranch, maybe breeding operation, not just breaking wild ones for quick sale. He met her eyes. But that's years of work, years of scraping by, building slow.
I know how to work.
Do you really? I can learn. I learned to shoot. Didn't I to ride to build a fire? She smiled. Besides, I have an excellent teacher. This teacher's not taking on students who might leave when things get hard. Then I guess you'll have to make sure I don't want to leave. The words hung between them, full of promise and challenge. Jonas felt something shift inside him, some last wall crumbling. The stage leaves at 2 tomorrow, he said. I know. Tom's sending some men to escort it to the county line. Make sure there's no more trouble from anyone else your father might send. That's thoughtful of him. Good connections to have, if someone was thinking of staying in the area. If someone was thinking of staying, Sarah agreed. They'd probably want to know more about the local community. Churches, schools, that sort of thing. Not much of either, I'm afraid. Circuit preacher comes through once a month. School marm teaches out of her house, but only has a handful of students. Room for growth, then. You could say that. They stood together looking out at the valley, each lost in thought. Finally, Sarah said, I should get back. Mrs. Patterson threatened to check on me, make sure I wasn't engaged in any more scandalous behavior. Can't have that. They rode back to town in companionable silence. At the hotel, Jonas helped her dismount. his hands lingering on her waist perhaps longer than necessary. "Jonas," she said softly, "whatever I decide tomorrow, thank you for everything, for giving me choices." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen a Nevada winter." She smiled. "Something to look forward to, then." He watched her climb the hotel steps, then led the horses to the livery. The street was quiet now. Most folks settling in for the night. Through the saloon windows, he could see men playing cards, living lives that seemed impossibly distant from his now. At the boarding house, Jonas lay awake thinking. In 12 hours, the stage would leave. Sarah would either be on it, heading toward a new life somewhere else, or she'd stay, build something with him, face whatever came next together. He thought about Elena, about the guilt he'd carried all these years. She'd died because of choices he'd made, the life he'd led. But Sarah was different. Sarah had chosen him with eyes wide open, knowing exactly what he was. Maybe that was enough. Maybe redemption came not from hiding from the past, but from building something better in spite of it. Outside his window, a lone rider passed by, heading out of town. Jonas tensed, then relaxed. Just a cowboy heading back to his ranch. Not a threat, but it reminded him that peace was always temporary in this land. There would be other challenges, other dangers. The question was whether he'd face them alone or with a storm-eyed woman who saw freedom where others saw only hardship. Tomorrow would bring the answer. Tonight, for the first time in 3 years, Jonas' heart allowed himself to hope. The morning of the stage's departure dawned clear and hot, the kind of day that promised dust and discomfort for travelers. Jonas stood at the window of Murphy's boarding house, watching the street come alive. The stage was already parked in front of the hotel, the driver checking harnesses while his shotgun rider loaded luggage. Jonas had been up since before dawn, unable to sleep. He'd packed his few belongings, settled his bill with Mrs. Murphy, and now found himself in limbo, waiting for a decision that wasn't his to make. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Tom Johnson stood in the hallway, hat in hand. "Morning, Jonas. Thought you might want to know. There's been another telegram." Jonas's jaw tightened. "From her father?" "No, from a Mr. Hartley, the banker she was supposed to marry." Tom's expression was grim. "He's increased the reward to $8,000 and says he's sending Pinkerton men." Pinkertons. Jonas felt a familiar cold settle in his chest. He'd dealt with them before, in his old life. They were a different breed than Wilson's thugs, professional, relentless, and legal. And, "My offer stands," Tom said. "You could work for me, both of you. The Box J is big enough that strangers asking questions wouldn't get far. Appreciate it, Tom, but running and hiding isn't a life. Neither is constantly looking over your shoulder." Jonas didn't argue. Tom was right, but it didn't change anything. If Sarah stayed, they'd deal with whatever came. If she left, "Stage leaves in 2 hours, Tom said. "Whatever happens, you've got friends here." After Tom left, Jonas made his way to the hotel. The lobby was busy with travelers, and he spotted Sarah immediately. She stood near the desk, wearing a traveling dress he didn't recognize. Something Mrs. Patterson must have procured. Her packed bag sat at her feet. Their eyes met across the room, and Jonas felt his heart sink. So, she'd made her choice, the smart choice. He couldn't blame her. She walked toward him, head high despite the curious stares from other guests. "Mr. Hart, I was hoping to see you before." "Before you left." His voice came out flat, emotionless. "It's the right decision." "Is it?" She studied his face. "Oh, you seem very certain." "Pinkertons are coming. Your father's not giving up. You'll be safer somewhere else. Somewhere they won't think to look." "And where would that be? Exactly where does a woman go to disappear completely? How far is far enough?" Jonas didn't have an answer for that. Sarah glanced around. then motioned toward the door. "Walk with me." They stepped out onto the boardwalk, where the morning sun was already fierce. The stage driver touched his hat as they passed. "Miss Whitmore, be ready to leave in about an hour." "Thank you, Mr. Crawford." They walked in silence to the end of the street, where the town gave way to desert. Sarah stopped, turning to face the wilderness. "Do you know what I realized this morning?" she asked. "I've been running for almost a month. Different towns, different names, always looking over my shoulder. And it hasn't mattered. They keep finding me." "Sarah, I could get on that stage, ride to San Francisco or Denver or anywhere else, and in a week, a month, 3 months, there'd be another Wilson, another group of men with guns and legal papers." She turned to him. "At what point do I stop running and start living?" "When you're safe." "I'll never be safe. Not as long as my father sees me as property to be retrieved. Not as long as Mr. Hartley sees me as an investment that got away." She laughed bitterly. $8,000. I'm worth more as a fugitive than I ever was as a daughter." "That's not—" "But you know what, yesterday, when we sat on that bluff, when you talked about building something permanent, for the first time in my life, I could see a future I actually wanted." Jonas's chest tightened. "Wanting something doesn't make it possible." "No, but not trying makes it impossible." She stepped closer. "You asked me last night if I understood what I was choosing. I do. Hard work, uncertain futures, people who might never accept me. But Jonas, I'd also be choosing love." The word hung between them like a challenge. "You don't love me," Jonas said roughly. "You can't. It's too soon. Don't tell me what I feel." Her eyes flashed. "I may be young. I may be inexperienced in many things, but I know my own heart. I knew it the moment you stood between me and Wilson's gun without hesitation. That was just what instinct, habit, or was it something more?" She reached out, placed her hand over his heart. "Tell me you feel nothing. Tell me these past days have meant nothing. Tell me to get on that stage, and I will." Jonas covered her hand with his. Around them, the town was watching. He could feel eyes from windows and doorways. In an hour, she'd be gone if he said the word. Safe, or as safe as she could be. Free to find a life somewhere with a better man, an easier path. "I can't," he said finally. "I can't what?" "Can't tell you to go. Can't pretend I don't." He struggled with words he hadn't said in years. "I'm no good at pretty speeches. Sarah, but when I think about tomorrow, next month, next year, you're there. Don't know when that happened, but it did." "Jonas." "I love you." The words came out rough, unpracticed. "God help us both, but I do. And if you're fool enough to stay, to try to build something with a broken-down gunfighter, then I'll spend every day trying to be worth it." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "You already are." He kissed her then, there on Main Street with half the town watching. It wasn't proper, wasn't cautious, wasn't smart, but it was honest. And after years of hiding, honesty felt like freedom. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Jonas became aware of applause. Tom Johnson stood on the hotel porch, clapping slowly, a grin on his weathered face. Mrs. Patterson looked scandalized, but even she seemed to be fighting a smile. "About time," Tom called. "Was starting to think I'd have to lock you two in a room until you sorted it out." Sarah laughed, the sound bright as morning. "Mr. Crawford," she called to the stage driver. "I'm afraid I won't be needing that seat after all." "Figured as much," Crawford said, not seeming put out. "Got a full load anyway." They walked back through town together, no longer concerned with propriety. At the boarding house, Mrs. Murphy met them at the door. "I suppose you'll be wanting your room back," she said to Jonas, her stern expression softened by the twinkle in her eye. "Actually," Jonas said, "we'll be needing the minister, or at least someone who can perform a marriage." Mrs.
Murphy's eyebrows shot up. Well, that's sudden. No, Sarah said, squeezing Jonas's hand. It's not sudden at all. The rest of the morning passed in a whirlwind. Tom sent riders to find the circuit preacher, who was thankfully only a few miles away. Maria appeared with a simple white dress for Sarah. Every woman deserves a wedding dress, she insisted. Even Mrs. Patterson contributed, offering her parlor for the ceremony. By noon, they stood before Reverend Campbell, a thin man with kind eyes who seemed unsurprised by the haste. Tom stood as witness for Jonas, while Maria stood with Sarah. Do you, Jonas Hart, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? The Reverend asked. Jonas looked at Sarah, seeing not the frightened girl from the creek, but a woman who'd chosen her path with eyes wide open. I do. And do you, Sarah Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. Her voice was clear, certain. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Nevada, I pronounce you man and wife. Jonas kissed his bride as the small gathering applauded. It wasn't the wedding she probably dreamed of as a girl, no cathedral, no society guests, no elaborate reception, but her smile was radiant. No regrets? He asked quietly as they signed the marriage certificate. Only one, she said. I wish we'd met sooner. Then we might not have been ready. True. She took his arm as they prepared to leave. Mr. Hart. Mrs. Hart. I like the sound of that. She smiled up at him. What happens now? Now we go home. Start building that life we talked about. The Pinkertons. We'll find a married woman, not a runaway. Harder to force a married woman to do anything against her will, even for her father. And if they try? Jonas's expression hardened. Then they'll learn what it means to threaten my wife. They left town that afternoon, riding side by side toward the ranch. Jonas had sent word ahead, and smoke rose from the cabin chimney. Someone, probably one of Tom's hands, had gone to air the place out. As they crested the final ridge, Sarah pulled up short. Jonas, look! The Mustangs were there, grazing in the meadow below the cabin. But among them was a new face, a coal-black stallion with a white star on his forehead. That's Midnight, Jonas said, surprised. I released him months ago. Couldn't gentle him. Figured he deserved to stay wild. But he came back. Seems so. Sarah studied the horse, then her husband. Maybe he just needed the right reason to stay. Maybe he did. They rode down to their home, as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The Pinkertons would come. Her father would rage. The town would gossip. But tonight, they were just two people who'd found each other against all odds. The virgin who'd stood at the river had become a wife. The gunfighter who'd sought solitude had found partnership. And in the growing shadows of the desert evening, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The user wants me to write part 7 of the story following the outline. This part should be Haman, An Sang Leloy falling action, where Jonas survives his wound thanks to Sarah's care. The town is divided. Some see Sarah as shameful. Others respect her courage. Jonas gradually accepts that love isn't chains but salvation. Sarah learns freedom isn't just running away, but daring to choose who to be with. Since, in my version, Jonas and Sarah are already married by the end of part 6, I need to adjust this to show the aftermath of their marriage, the Pinkertons arriving, community reactions, their growing bond and understanding. Setting up for the final resolution, I should maintain the Western atmosphere, the character development, and the themes of freedom and choice. 2 weeks had passed since the wedding, and Sarah was beginning to understand the rhythm of ranch life. She rose with Jonas before dawn, made coffee while he tended the horses, and spent her days learning the countless tasks that kept their small homestead running. This morning, however, brought visitors. Jonas spotted the dust cloud first, 3 riders approaching from the east.
He set down the harness he'd been mending and checked his gun. "Stay inside," he told Sarah.
No.
She stood beside him on the porch, rifle in hand.
We face things together now. Remember?
The riders were well dressed, their horses quality stock. City men trying to look comfortable in the wilderness. The leader, a thin man with steel-gray hair and cold eyes, dismounted at a respectful distance. "Mr. Hart, my name is James Thornton, Pinkerton Detective Agency. I believe you know why we're here." "I might have some ideas," Jonas said mildly. Thornton's gaze shifted to Sarah.
"Miss Whitmore."
"Mrs. Hart," Sarah corrected firmly.
Yes, we'd heard about the marriage."
Thornton's tone suggested what he thought of it. "Your father is quite concerned. Mrs. Hart, he believes you may have been coerced." Sarah laughed, the sound sharp as glass.
"Coerced, Mr. Thornton. I've never made a freer choice in my life."
"Nevertheless, he's asked us to confirm your well-being. Perhaps we could speak privately." "No need," Sarah said. "I'm perfectly well, as you can see. Married by my own choice to a good man. You can tell my father that his concern is noted but unnecessary." Thornton produced a document from his coat. "There's also the matter of certain items taken from your father's home. Money, specifically. He's prepared to press charges."
"Against his own daughter."
Jonas's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "Against whoever aided in the theft, unless, of course, Mrs. Hart agrees to return with us to discuss the matter with her father directly." Sarah stepped forward, but Jonas caught her arm.
"How much?"
"I beg your pardon."
"The money. How much does he say she took?"
$300. Jonas disappeared into the cabin, returning with a leather pouch. He counted out bills onto the porch rail. $300, plus another $50 for interest. Tell Mr. Whitmore his daughter's debts are paid." Thornton looked at the money, then at Jonas. "This resolves the immediate issue, but Mr. Whitmore remains concerned."
"Mr. Whitmore can remain concerned until hell freezes over," Sarah said. "I'm of age, legally married, and exactly where I choose to be. There's nothing more to discuss."
The detective studied them both, then slowly picked up the money. "I'll convey your message. However, I should warn you, Mr. Whitmore is not a man who accepts defeat easily." "Neither am I," Jonas said. After the Pinkertons left, Sarah sank onto the porch steps.
$350? Jonas, that must have been—"
Everything I had saved, and worth every penny to see their faces. He sat beside her. "We'll make do. I'll pay you back, somehow. You're my wife. What's mine is yours, including the debts." He put his arm around her. "Besides, I've been poor before. At least this time I've got good company." That Sunday, they ventured into town for supplies. Jonas had warned her that reactions would be mixed, but Sarah wasn't prepared for the reality. Some folks, like Tom and Maria, greeted them warmly. Others, particularly the more respectable women, turned away or whispered behind their hands. At the general store, Mrs. Patterson cornered Sarah while Jonas loaded supplies.
"My dear,"
she said, voice dripping with false concern,
"I do hope you know what you've done.
marriage in haste is one thing, but to a man like that—"
"A man like what?" Sarah kept her voice pleasant.
"Well, his past, dear, the violence. And now this business with the Pinkertons. You've brought such scandal to our little town."
"I've brought nothing but myself. Mrs. Patterson."
"If that's scandalous, perhaps the problem isn't with me." The older woman's face flushed. "Well, I was only trying to help, but if you prefer to align yourself with the rougher elements—"
"I prefer to align myself with honest people,"
Sarah said,
"regardless of their past."
She found Jonas outside, talking with Tom Johnson and another rancher named Bill Hayes. The men fell silent as she approached. "Don't stop on my account," she said. Tom grinned. "Just telling Jonas about the horse auction next month. Might be a good opportunity if you're looking to expand the herd." "We'll need money for that," Jonas said. "Could offer you work," Bill Hayes said, though he looked uncomfortable. "Got a drive coming up, could use an extra hand, though," he glanced at Sarah. "Might be gone 2 weeks or more." "We'll manage," Sarah said firmly. "Won't we? Jonas?" Her husband studied her. "It's good money. Could set us up for winter." "Then you should go." That evening, as they prepared dinner together, Jonas said, "You handled Mrs. Patterson well. She reminds me of the ladies my mother used to invite for tea, all sugar on the surface and vinegar underneath." Sarah sliced potatoes with perhaps more force than necessary. "I won't apologize for our marriage. Jonas, not to her, not to anyone. I'm not asking you to. Just want to make sure you understand it won't get easier. Some folks have long memories. And some folks have nothing better to do than judge others." She set down the knife. "Do you regret it marrying me the truth now?" Jonas pulled her close. "Only thing I regret is that I can't give you better. You deserve—" She silenced him with a kiss. "I have exactly what I deserve. A man who sees me as an equal. A home we're building together. Freedom to make my own choices. What more could I want?" "Indoor plumbing," he suggested, and she laughed. "Well, perhaps someday." Over the following days, they fell into a new routine. Jonas taught her more about the horses, how to read their moods, predict their movements. Sarah discovered she had a talent for gentling the younger ones, her patience offsetting her inexperience. "You're a natural," Jonas told her as she worked with a skittish yearling. "He trusts you." "I know what it's like to be frightened and trapped," she said softly. "To want to run, but not know where." The horse nuzzled her hand, and Jonas felt his heart constrict. Every day revealed new depths to this woman he'd married. Her strength, her compassion, her stubbornness, which had only grown since their wedding. Not everyone in town remained hostile. The schoolteacher, Miss Fletcher, stopped by one afternoon with a basket of preserves and an offer. "I could use help with the older students," she said. "You're clearly educated. Mrs. Hart. The children would benefit from your knowledge." Sarah's face lit up. "I'd love that, though I should warn you, I've never taught before." "Neither had I when I started. You'll learn." After Miss Fletcher left, Sarah turned to Jonas with shining eyes. "Teaching I could contribute. Help with money." "It won't pay much," he warned. "I don't care. It's something. A purpose beyond just surviving." That night, as they lay together in their bed, still a wonder to Jonas, Sarah traced the scars on his chest with gentle fingers. "Will you tell me about these? Not tonight, if you're not ready. But someday." "Someday," he agreed. "When the memories don't cut so deep." "I can wait." She curled against him. "We have time now." But time, Jonas knew, was never guaranteed. The Pinkertons had left, but they'd be back. Or others would come. Men like Whitmore didn't give up easily. Still, lying there with Sarah in his arms, he allowed himself to believe they'd find a way through. She'd already changed him in ways he hadn't thought possible, made him believe in futures beyond tomorrow, in building rather than just surviving. "Jonas," she whispered in the darkness. Thank you for paying my father. I know what it cost you." "Cost me nothing compared to what I gained." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I love you." "Love you too, darling." It still felt strange to say, like wearing new boots that hadn't quite broken in yet. But Jonas was learning that some changes were worth the discomfort. Outside, a coyote howled at the moon. The horses stirred in the corral, then settled, and in the cabin that had once held only loneliness, Two people who'd found each other against all odds, held tight, and dreamed of tomorrow. The virgin who'd stood at the river had become a wife, a partner, a woman claiming her place in a hard world. The gunfighter who'd sought only peace had found something better, a reason to fight for more than just survival. They'd weather whatever came next, together. The autumn wind carried the promise of winter as Jonas stood on the hill overlooking Coyote Springs. 6 months had passed since his wedding. 6 months of building a life he'd never dared imagine. Below, the town prepared for the harvest festival, banners strung across Main Street, tables set up for the communal feast. "You sure about this?" Tom Johnson asked, standing beside him.
Sarah wants to go, says we can't hide forever.
"She's right, though I'd wager half the town still got their opinions about you two." Jonas shrugged. Their opinions don't put food on our table or hay in our barn. It was true. They'd managed well enough without the town's full approval. Sarah's teaching brought in a small but steady income, and the horse operation was finally showing profit. They'd even managed to buy 3 new mares at the auction, quality stock that would improve their breeding program. "Besides," Jonas added, "Sarah's got it in her head that we need to be part of the community. Says isolation's just another kind of prison." Tom chuckled.
That woman's been good for you. Hart, never seen you talk so much about the future.
They rode down together, joining the stream of families heading into town. Sarah was already there with Miss Fletcher, helping set up the school's booth where children would sell preserves and handicrafts to raise money for books. She looked up as Jonas approached, her face lighting with that smile that still caught him off guard. She wore a new dress, simple blue calico. Nothing fancy, but she'd made it herself and wore it with pride.
Mr. Hart,"
she said formally, eyes dancing.
"How good of you to come."
"Mrs. Hart," he replied, playing along. "Wouldn't miss it." "Jonas!" a small voice piped up, and he looked down to find Lucy Hayes, one of Sarah's students, tugging at his coat. "Mrs. Hart says you can gentle wild horses. Is that true?" "Sometimes," he said, crouching to her level. "If you're patient enough."
"Could you teach me?"
"Lucy, don't bother Mr. Hart," her mother said sharply, pulling the child back. "Mrs." Hayes had been one of the most vocal critics of their marriage. "She's no bother," Jonas said mildly. Still, Mrs. Hayes's mouth was a thin line. "Come, Lucy, we have other booths to visit." As they walked away, Jonas heard Lucy ask,
"Why don't you like Mrs. Hart? Mama, she's the best teacher ever."
Sarah touched his arm.
"Don't let it trouble you."
"Doesn't trouble me, but it bothers you." "Less than it used to." She straightened his collar, a wifely gesture that felt natural now. "I have my students. I have you. The rest will come with time or it won't." The festival continued around them. Games for children, speeches from town officials, more food than the small community could possibly eat. Jonas found himself drawn into conversations, men asking about his horses, seeking advice on breeding or training. It felt strange, but not unpleasant, being treated as just another rancher rather than a dangerous outsider. As evening approached, the dancing began. The town had hired a small band from Carson City, and couples began forming up for a reel. Jonas was content to watch, but Sarah had other ideas. "Dance with me," she said. "I don't dance." "You do now." She pulled him toward the cleared area despite his protests.
"Sarah, I don't know the steps."
"Then we'll make our own." And they did, fumbling through the patterns while other couples moved with practiced ease. Jonas was acutely aware of eyes on them, some amused, some disapproving, some thoughtful. But Sarah just laughed when he stepped on her feet, and soon he found himself relaxing into the rhythm. "See," she said as they swayed together. "Not so terrible." "Speak for yourself. Pretty sure I just crippled the banker's wife. She'll survive." Sarah's expression grew serious.
"Jonas, There's something I need to tell you. His hand tightened on her waist. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. In fact, she glanced around, then leaned closer. I'm fairly certain we're going to have a baby. Jonas stopped moving so abruptly that the couple behind them nearly collided with them. What? Keep dancing, she hissed, smiling apologetically at the other dancers. I wasn't going to tell you here, but you look so happy, and I couldn't wait. A baby? His mind struggled to process this. You're sure? As sure as I can be. I saw Doc Hillman yesterday. She searched his face anxiously. Is this good news? Jonas pulled her close, not caring who saw. The best news. Sarah, are you feeling all right? Should you be dancing? I'm fine, she laughed. It's early days yet. Spring, the doctor thinks. Spring. A child. His child. Their child. The thought was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. They finished the dance in a daze, Jonas's mind racing. As they walked back to their wagon, Sarah tucked against his side. He found himself planning. They'd need to expand the cabin, build a proper room, maybe install that indoor plumbing she joked about. The teaching money would help. And if the horses sold well... Jonas. The voice stopped him cold. He turned to find a man standing in the shadows between buildings, well-dressed, older, with Sarah's gray eyes and stubborn chin. Father? Sarah whispered. Charles Whitmore stepped into the light. He looked older than Jonas had expected, worn down by months of searching for his daughter. Behind him stood two men, not Pinkertons this time, just hired muscle. Sarah, Whitmore said, you look... Well, I am well. Sarah's chin lifted. What are you doing here? I came to see my daughter, to try to understand. His gaze shifted to Jonas, and to meet the man who stole her away. Nobody stole me, Sarah said sharply. I left of my own free will. To become this, Whitmore gestured at her simple dress, her work-roughened hands. You were meant for better things. Sarah, education, society, culture. I have education. I'm teaching school. As for society... She glanced around at the townspeople, pretending not to watch. I have all the society I need. Living in poverty with a gunfighter. Living in love with my husband. Sarah corrected. Building something real. Something that's ours. Can you understand that? Father, have you ever built anything that wasn't measured in dollars? Whitmore's face darkened. Don't lecture me about building, girl. Everything you had, every advantage, came from what I built. And the price was my freedom. Too high. Father, far too high. Mr. Whitmore. Jonas spoke for the first time. You've come a long way. Say what you need to say. The older man studied him. You're not what I expected. Neither is your daughter, I'd wager. No. Whitmore's voice was bitter. The daughter I raised would never have run away, never have defied her family, never have chosen this. Then maybe, Sarah said quietly, you never really knew your daughter at all. Father and daughter stared at each other across a gulf wider than the months of separation. Finally. Whitmore reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. Your mother wanted you to have this. Her pearls, some family photographs, a letter. He held it out awkwardly. She misses you. Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands. How is she? Heartbroken, but surviving, as we all must. Whitmore turned to go, then paused. The offer to come home stands. Sarah, it will always stand. When you tire of playing frontier wife, when the hardship becomes too much. It won't. We'll see. He looked at Jonas one last time. Take care of her. Heart. She's stubborn, but she's precious. I know. Jonas said simply. Whitmore walked away, his men falling in behind him.
Sarah stood frozen, clutching the envelope, until they disappeared into the darkness. "Are you all right?" Jonas asked.
"I don't know." Tears ran down her face. "I thought I'd feel angry if I saw him, but I just feel sad for him, for Mother, for all of it."
"Come on, let's go home." They drove back to the ranch in silence. Sarah pressed against his side. Once home. She opened the envelope by lamplight. The pearls spilled out, elegant and out of place in their simple cabin. The photograph showed a younger Sarah with her parents, all three stiff and formal. The letter from her mother was short, full of careful words that said little but implied much.
"She wants me to be happy," Sarah said, "but she doesn't understand how I could be happy here."
"Are you happy?"
She looked up at him. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible. Scared too, about the baby, about making ends meet, about 1,000 things. But happy, yes."
Jonas pulled her close. "Then that's all that matters." "Is it? My father will never accept this. The town barely tolerates us. We're building our life on the margins." "Jonas!"
"Maybe, but it's our life, our choices. That's more than most folks get."
Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, "Did you see Lucy Hayes tonight, how she wanted to learn about horses from you?"
"I saw."
Children don't see the past, only the present. By the time our child is grown, you'll just be Jonas Hart, horse rancher and devoted father. The rest will be old history."
"You think so?" "I know so. Time heals. Jonas, time and stubborn persistence." She managed to smile. "And I'm very good at stubborn persistence."
"That you are Mrs. Hart, that you are." Later, as they prepared for bed, Jonas watched Sarah carefully fold her mother's letter and tuck it away with the photographs. The pearls she held up to the light, studying them.
"I'll never wear them," she said, "but maybe someday. Our daughter will. Might be a son. Might be. But something tells me we're having a daughter. Stubborn as her mother and tough as her father." She placed the pearls in a small wooden box. "Either way, they'll have choices. Real choices. That's what we're building here. Isn't it? A place where people can choose their own paths?"
"I reckon so." Sarah blew out the lamp and joined him in bed. Outside, the wind howled around the cabin, promising snow before long. But inside, they were warm and safe and together. "Jonas," she said in the darkness. "No more secrets between us. No more walls. We face everything together from now on." "Everything," he agreed.
"And Jonas, next time there's a town dance, you're practicing the steps beforehand."
He chuckled. "Yes, ma'am." They lay quiet then, each lost in thought. The virgin who'd stood at the river was gone, transformed into a woman who'd claimed her place in the world through courage and choice. The gunfighter who'd sought only solitude had found family, community, purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Whitmore might return, or send others. The town would continue to whisper. Money would be tight. Work would be hard. And soon there'd be a child depending on them. But tonight, in their bed in their home on their land, Jonas and Sarah Hart held each other and knew they'd already won the only battle that truly mattered, the right to write their own story. Whatever the cost, and in the end, that freedom was worth more than all the pearls and propriety in the world. Thank you all for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below where you are and what you thought about Jonas and Sarah's journey. If you enjoyed this tale from the American frontier, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories of love, courage, and redemption in the Old West. Don't forget to like this video and hit the hype button to help more people discover these stories. Until next time, partners.